So first off, my first problem with Lizzie McGuire is that I think I confused it with Hannah Montana because I'm watching the first episode and I'm like, when does she turn into Lizzie McGuire? And she, oh yes, oh God, yes. Welcome back to Is It Still Good? This is the show where we take our rose-colored glasses, we remove them, we remove pounds of hair from our face as well, enough to make a full merkin for ourselves. And it is with that pubic patch and without the glasses that we are forced to look upon the culture of our youth and, goddamn it, ask ourselves, is it still good? We're two grown-up film students. We hate growing up. I'm Bear Kennedy. I'm back in my home of beautiful Chicago in the springtime. And joining me as always,
Andrew Carter in beautiful Los Angeles in the springtime. For anybody watching, Bear did shave his beard. I think look, I love it when you have the beard. I love it now. I just want to get up all in there.
I look
How are you feeling?
a lot younger. I look like distractingly younger,
You do look a lot younger. That
which
is
is
true. You,
which
you
is
look about 10
hardcore.
years younger.
That's what everyone keeps saying, and I look old to begin with. So they're like, "Oh, you went from about 45 to 35," and I'm 32, so I'm still trending above chronology.
It looks
Um,
good.
thank you
Looks
very
good.
much.
Yeah.
Feeling
And
good.
I think you should I think you should embrace the fact that people say you look 10 years younger. I think I understand why you did it too, because the spring it's going to get hotter.
Got hotter.
It's going to be tough to have that beard in the summer.
It is noticeably bad. But the worst part is like when I shave it, I had like 4 inches of it. So I keep grabbing for my beard like here, like well below my chin, and it's not there. And that's gotta it's probably it's very similar to if you have a limb amputated and you feel like your fingers move. It's the same thing, but with a
Yeah.
beard. It's a phantom beard.
Oh boy. Well, it's good to see your actual face for the first time in I don't know how long.
Yeah. It was seven
In
months.
7 months. Wow, Jesus Christ, man. We are here today to discuss Lizzie McGuire, which turned 20 this year. It premiered in January of
Finally legal.
2001. Yeah, oh my God. Yeah, isn't that great? Yeah, right. The show is older than we were when we started watching it. Um, Meaning like when we were watching it, we were 12 and now it's 20. That's a stupid, I'm an idiot. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
I mean it was close. I mean you're not wrong. It's just
I'm not
it's
wrong. It just is like dumb. It's just who cares. But it premiered in January of 2001. Bear, what's your first memory with good old Lizzie?
I remember it being on a lot. And like kids I babysat liked it a lot, and my sister fucking loved it. But this was not a show that I was super keyed into at the time. This
Okay.
is another thing that like a lot of things, unfortunately, just a lot of stuff we've addressed on the show. And I think it's specific to stuff that came out kind of after the year 2000. This is yet another thing I was just a little too old for. So I remember it being out, but it was like a show for children.
Hmm.
And then the more I thought about it, the more I thought like, okay, at that age, came out in 2001. So I was like 12, 13. That was, wheelhouse. Had just seen like Saving Silverman, thought that was the greatest thing ever committed to celluloid. At that age for me, I wanted to see shit that was geared towards older audiences. And I
Wow.
think
Okay.
even though I was in the same grade, I think, as the character Lizzie, like this show is essentially about my peers at the time.
Right.
I think I was more attracted to stuff that was a couple years older than me. Like I always had that as a kid growing up. I always wanted stuff that was a little outside of my age group.
I
And
think
so
that
stuff
is
like
a
this,
thing when
I
you're
think it's
that
a thing too.
age.
Yeah, I think it is. And something like this that really should have been for me just felt young, even though it functionally isn't.
That's such an interesting point because I I agree that that is a thing for that age where it's like you just whatever age you are, you want something that's a little bit beyond your years, especially when you're
Yeah.
young. Maybe not so much right now, but when you're young, it's like you want to be cool and you want to be, more advanced for your age. So you want to like watch
Yes.
R-rated movies when you're
Oh
12
yeah.
and what's so interesting about that is like the flip side of it is kind of I think what you can say about the creators of this show. I mean, they are I don't know how old they were when they created it. Odds are they're in their 30s, 40s, whatever. And like that was the most bizarre thing to me rewatching it was that this is a show for 12-year-olds and it feels like it was made by 12-year-olds, but these, they're grown adults. And like I'm talking about, the sound effects and the jump cuts and the flash cuts and everything and the photo thing. And it's just first of all, it's very much a product of its time. It took me right back to 2001. I remember that theme song well. I watched it when it was on. And
were you into it? Did you love it?
Yes, I did. I really did like it. And mainly because I think my friends and I justified the fact that justified it by saying like, oh, we thought Hillary Duff was like, smoking. We had such a crush on her when we were that age. And so we were like, all right, like Hillary Duff's hot, so it's cool, And
she's been working out.
Yeah, right. But then as you watch it, it's funny. I was watching a few episodes last night with Zoe and we were both like, Gordo is definitely the voice of reason and the coolest one. Like everything he says in that show, I agree with now. Like how you look at a picture is not as important as who you are as a person and all that stuff. I thought that I was just like, and I always liked him as a kid too, but I was never able to articulate it. So then I was like, okay, now I get it. But I definitely liked it as a kid. I don't remember watching it with my sisters. I remember watching it a lot with my buddy TJ. Shout out to TJ Picarillo, because we both had a crush on Hill Dog. And just being like, we loved Lizzie McGuire. We watched it, whatever, every week or whatever. And again, the weirdest thing about watching it this time is like, I just can't get over the fact that adults created it and like did all of it.
Well, yes, I agree with you, but it's more to the show's credit that it does appear to be created by people not only of that age, but of that age at that time. I don't know how the fuck, like if I was to write something now about kids in middle school, I would write Lizzie McGuire because that was my middle school. Right. I would not be able to do a present day, any kind of rendition of what it's like now. I don't have any fucking idea what it's like.
I have no idea. Right.
So exactly. I don't know how they were able to get that in the moment. It's weirdly impressive.
I was just going to say that the whole thing of them being like, feeling like a show made by 12-year-olds, I mean that as a compliment. I don't mean that as an insult. I don't mean like, geez, these adults are what I'm like, they're actually really fucking good at what they're doing. And that's, I think, part of why the show took off. It had that authenticity. And watching it now, I was like, oh my God, because you're right. It's like kids today are texting and they're on social media. I would not know how to write that for 12
I have no idea. But that couldn't be farther from my experience. That is unbelievable.
But these adults 20 years ago knew how to write kids that were IMing and, all that stuff. And that's what we were doing. And I'm like, how the hell did they how did they do that? That's a very good point.
And they're around child actors. So those kids can't have been that much help because child actors have a weird life. They don't have a normal experience.
They don't, but at the same time, that's a very good point, but I'm sure that they are, I mean, I don't know what went into it, but I imagine that they might have been like, hey, what's going on? Like, so tell us about this IM thing. And that's the thing with kids when they're that age, that, kids are honest. No, anywhere from ages like 1 to 18, kids are honest just by nature of being who they are. And they're like, oh, IMing, here's what it is. It's like you have a buddy list and all that stuff. Although I will say in the pilot, when the thing accidentally gets sent out, that would not happen.
It's so dumb.
That was very far-fetched. That all of a sudden everybody gets highlighted. I'm like, no, that doesn't.
Nah, like we all know how email works. Like it's not quite.
Yeah, it's not quite like that.
Well, it's interesting.
Kind of like in American Pie when he's like, Jim addressed the email wrong. It's like that wouldn't fucking
stupid.
Yeah, that would.
But I agree. When we say like saving Silverman as 4 13-year-old boys, that is an insult. This being for people in middle school is impressive. That the genuine nature of it is very, very interesting.
Right.
Something you said, the pilot. So I don't know if you came across this, but actually the show is not aired in chronological order.
Yeah,
which I had no idea.
I wanted you to talk about that because you made a point.
This fucked me up. So first off, my first problem with Lizzie McGuire is that I think I confused it with Hannah Montana, I'm watching the first episode and I'm like, when does she turn into Lizzie McGuire? And she that's it just
when
she
she
just
starts
is.
singing. Yeah.
Yeah, what is her alter ego?
Where's
have?
Miley?
Yeah, but okay, so Lizzie McGuire does not have an alter ego. She just has you are able to see her inner monologue personified by this cartoon character. Which isn't the same thing as turning into like Stefan or anything like that. So I'm watching, I turned it on, and my first thought was, I'm going to watch every fucking episode of Liz McGuire and become an expert at this. I did not even I watched like 6. I didn't follow through on that.
More than me. I watched 2.
Okay, so the first episode just jumps right in. They have this plot where they're IMing. She says some shit about this other kid at school, Kate, and it goes to the whole school, and it sets off like a prank war because Lizzie's friend Lelaine Miranda takes the heat for it, and it's this whole deal. Mm-hmm. I was like, how am I supposed to know who any of these fucking people are?
It's a really good point.
I was right about that because the actual first episode is the 4th episode. It was, for some reason, I can't figure out why, but the show was not aired in its shooting order.
So it actually aired with the episode, the first episode on Disney Plus, like
so if you watch it right now on Disney Plus, it's in the air order, which that first episode is the IM one. The real first episode is where they go to camp, and she like actually explains who these people are, because you're like, because her and Kate have a backstory that's like just hinted at, like world building, and somehow you just accept it, and it's like, what the fuck? So she like does a monologue about who all these people are in her life and gives them like a proper introduction.
Right.
And a lot of the episodes are completely aired out of order. Like I didn't get to it, even though I meant to, but the last episode, there's 2 seasons and they're like 36 episodes long, which is fucking nuts. But in the middle of the second season, they graduate middle school and go to high school. And then there's like 15 episodes after that where they're still in middle school. So like the actual chronological last episode is not the last one. Yes. So
that's bizarre.
So that is really odd. But at the same time, and I don't really think this happens anymore, but it reminded me of like sitcoms that we grew up with in the 90s that were kind of meant for syndication. And like Family Matters comes to mind, Full House. This is kind of in there where every episode is a self-contained deal.
Right.
Even to some extent, like Seinfeld is kind of like that. They do more like season long or multiple episode arches for stuff.
Right.
But essentially you could watch all these episodes out of order and you wouldn't be that confused. You can just kind of pick it up, especially if you're a kid, you would just kind of accept it. And that's what I remember about Lizzie McGuire as well, is that it was kind of just always on. And that's like a completely different model of television than what we have now, where it's expected to have some kind of longer overarching plot where it isn't just on for you to see. Like I remember like specifically trying to tune in for like the first episode of like Family Matters. Because they never aired them really in any order. You just turned that shit on, it was on. So this is from that same vein, and that feels so old school. And I loved that nostalgia element of a show that just here's every episode. You never need backstory. It's just always on. You just turn it on.
What's interesting about that? I have 2 thoughts about that. One, that definitely sounds like an executive note of, well, if we start with a camp episode, people are going to think it's a camp show, and it's not a camp show, so we got to change it up.
My God, yeah.
So that's number 1. Number 2, though, is that part of what I think helped. I mean, first of all, watching it this time, I remembered the episode, but I didn't remember it being the first or the third or whatever the fuck. But considering that I had watched Lizzie McGuire growing up, I had the context of who these characters were. So I wasn't, it sounds like you were just like, well, who the hell is anybody? But I think what Disney Channel specifically did was, I remember, not only do I remember Lizzie McGuire, I remember the promos, and they shoved that shit down our throats. So by the time Lizzie McGuire aired, we all knew who she was and who her friends were, because that shit was in the commercials. That stuff was in the ads. It was in the ad campaign. So it was a pretty ingenious thing that they did, was to use the ad campaign to introduce its audience to its characters and then just start them. Because you know what? I'm sure, and I didn't watch it, but I'm sure episode 4 with them at camp is a much better character introduction than the prank war one.
Yeah, no, big time. Because there is none on the prank war one.
There is none.
It's a very weird first episode. And now it's different now. Like a lot of stuff obviously comes out at once. They release the whole season or whatever. There's not as much week to week television, but there's still more of a sense of season. Whereas with this, I feel like that's completely lost. 2 seasons. Even I talked to my sister. She's like, "Oh, there's like 6 seasons." Like, no, there's 2.
Yeah, and it felt like more because they broke up the episodes in blocks. But yeah, there's only 2.
That structure just like has faded now with how TV is. It's interesting to go back and watch something that's 2 extremely long seasons without a sense of really time passing in the show, basically at all, and have it not be any kind of arc that's carrying all these people through what they're going through, other than they are in middle school, but that's basically the situation. I mean, Christ, have you ever seen like the first or last episode of Saved by the Bell?
No, right.
And you've probably watched a ton of Saved by the Bell. It's like that same model. I never really thought about this, but that model of TV is like gone, and it made me feel like a kid just to watch TV like that again.
Yeah, this Saved by the Bell, Growing Pains, Family Matters. Yeah, you mentioned a bunch of them, and that's so true. And I think part of the reason for that is, number one, things have just grown more serialized in recent years. And I think a lot of that has to do with the binge model that Netflix introduced, which I like. I mean, I think it's fun, but there is a big difference between a comedy like Friends and a comedy like, say, I guess Curb Your Enthusiasm. I mean, that show does have like a season long arc.
It does. There's something going on in every season of that show,
right? But
even though the scenarios are contained.
Yeah, but I think part of why that is it just, since stuff is so algorithm based now, people they want to give people a reason to come back. You got to watch the next one. It's like, it's funny because I think dramas maybe have always been, maybe not always, no, because even ER was like, that would be like bottle episodes. It was procedurals, right? Like that's what dramas used to mostly be, was procedurals. But now you have things like, The Undoing on HBO, which is a limited series, but it's like, I gotta fucking find out what happens next. Same with Big Little Lies, and I haven't watched The Queen's Gambit, but apparently that's one of those too.
And even like there is still network model TV. Like I don't know why the fuck I watched whatever the Christopher Maroney spinoff of SVU is, like Law and Order Organized Crime or something.
Oh, the most recent one.
Yeah. Like there's still a lot of that. And even like Supernatural, which I've watched a lot of, and I think fucking slaps. Like there's a lot of self-contained episodes of Supernatural, but they usually tie into the main plot, even like when they're in a mid-season slump and it's real monster of the week shit. Usually like the last 5 minutes ties into whatever the brothers are dealing with.
Right.
For 22 episodes of a CW series. I know I don't watch Roswell like an idiot, but our friend of the show, Michael Flamis, I imagine that's probably similar structure to that too.
Well, what's interesting with Roswell, it's definitely serialized for sure. Every episode opens with previously on Roswell to keep you updated and everything. So that one's tough. I wouldn't consider that a lot of bottle episodes.
Interesting.
Based on what I've seen, what I would say is that it's a serialized show that works in elements of kind of, a 5-act story where characters figure something out, but it all is kind of tying into the overarching, story of the show. It'd be interesting to have him talk about that. Yeah. But
I'd be very curious about that. There's none of that here with Lizzie McGuire.
None of it. I mean, things wrap up nicely. I mean, same with Friends, man. That's the TV we grew up watching. Like was episodes where things were wrapped up, and then, it's different. It's like, I feel like we've gone from like hangout TV to way more for lack of a better word, involving TV. Not that Friends and Seinfeld and all that, not that those weren't involving, but if you think about it, you can have Friends on in the background or Seinfeld on in the background, and you can be cooking and still picking up what's happening.
Yeah.
But you can't do that with Breaking Bad. You can't do that with The Sopranos or The Americans or something, which Zoe and I were watching The Americans for the first time. It's so good.
I watched a season and a half of it, and then Jackie like lost interest, and I'm it's killing me. I loved the first season. I mean, okay, obviously, look, I'm on the side of Russia usually in anything Cold War, so it's right to my sensibilities.
Yeah, I don't blame you. As someone with ADD, who sometimes it's hard for me to sit down and watch like 45-minute episodes with a lot. I mean, it can be a little convoluted.
Sure, spy
like,
shit. You know, it's
with like the disguise and it's just like there's a lot going on.
The fucking the costumes, the makeup, and the level of gore is just
it's amazing. But let me another thing, the amount of acting that Matthew Rhys and Kerry Russell do in terms of playing characters within characters within that is astounding.
Very satisfying. Yes.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Anyway, we digress. Lizzie McGuire. So I wrote down a few notes specifically about the episode. So here's what I wrote. I said, I know it's a kid's show, but the craziest part about it is the fact that adults created it. The sound effects, the music, Jesus.
Yeah.
But again, that's a compliment because they really except for that buddyless, sending out, which we all know wouldn't happen. They really did nail the authenticity. One thing I liked about it was that I liked that her friends were honest with her when they were like, when Miranda says, you can't handle conflict, and Gordo says you're a coward. And what I liked about that is that they were still her friends at the end of the day after saying that. They weren't teasing her. They were being honest with her. They were saying, look, Lizzie, we know you. This isn't going to go, if you admit this to Kate, it isn't going to go over well. But that was my problem with that episode, was like, it felt like the same beat was hit probably 5 or 6 times of Lizzie being like, and stuttering. It got a little tiring. We were like, okay, we know you're eventually going to admit it. So like, it felt like the writers were kind of running out of ideas and things for her to do. It's not Hilary Duff's fault. She's great. But it was just a little bit like, okay, let's think of other things to do. And it felt like the lizard subplot was a little thin. It was just kind of, and then the whole twist of like, oh, it actually might be alive was just a little morbid.
There's moments in this show that is 22 minutes where it's like, I want this to be over.
Yes. Yeah. And that leads me to my next note, which was, this show is just weird. The cheerleaders calling her a loser, and the chant was even the chant was like rhythmically a little off. It was like, Lizzie, loser. I can't remember exactly, but Zoe and I were watching it like, what the fuck? But the one mostly positive, I guess, aside from the friends being honest with her, I thought her unicorn sweater aged pretty well. It was a pretty cool sweater. I don't think it's that embarrassing. And I did like the subplot of the kid pretending to be sick and his mom putting him to work and then him actually getting sick. I thought that was clever.
I enjoyed that. My sister's favorite episode is one where, and apparently this is like the episode of Lizzie McGuire where she goes to buy her first bra with Miranda.
I remember that one. Yeah.
And that's fine. But my biggest issue with Lizzie McGuire is that, and honestly, it's one of the reasons why, many years ago I wanted to start doing this show. I couldn't. No one's been able to articulate why they like it. Even my sister, who's like a big fan of it, was not able to get past "it's so good," and that level of discussion is something I really push back on in life, especially when you're looking back on things that are old. You need to tell me why this is good, and you need to have some examples.
First of all, we definitely should have had a woman guest on this show today to tell us, because I would want to hear. I agree with you. I'd want to hear what they love about it so much. And we
can always do part 2.
We can always do part 2, and I fully recognize that 2 men talking about Lizzie McGuire and why they're not huge fans of it in 2021.
But at the time, this seemed more gendered to me than it does now. The situations, I mean, I just described an episode where she goes to get her first bra, but it doesn't seem like a girl's show, even though the main character is a girl. I didn't find it to be gendered
No.
where I'm like, I don't want to, I got nothing.
That's exactly my point. Is
Here.
that's why I
Yeah.
watched it as a kid. Is like, yeah, we justified it with being like Hillary Duff is hot, but it catered to us. Like,
Yeah.
it catered to boys and girls at that age. Period. Like, if you were in middle school, you watched Lizzie McGuire and you related to what was happening. Period.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe not period, but for the most part, yes. Yeah, I'd like to hear someone's opinion why, because you're right. You hear that a lot about like older stuff, like when people just say, "Oh, it's just so good." If I can put
That's not
myself
a
in
reason.
someone, what?
That's not an argument.
Right, right. It's not.
It's a step removed from. I mean, it's based on the same level of, oh, remember this, remember that. It's like, this isn't a discussion. This is just you naming shit.
Right, and that's precisely what I think we're trying to get into with the show, which is
Yeah,
okay,
always.
is it still good and why? And so I think it's easy for people to just immediately have a knee-jerk reaction of, "Oh yeah, of course it is," but it's like, "But wait a minute, why is it still good? Let's
Yeah.
talk about why." Similar to what we talked about with Space Jam, and what I appreciated about that episode and that conversation with Aaron and Liz was how nuanced they were. Like they still both said, "No, we still consider it good," but they were open and they were like, "No, look, it was a bit of a tough watch. There were some things that really didn't add up," and that is something I'm much more. And for me personally, that's something I'm much more receptive to hearing than someone who's just about something when they're just like, "Oh no, it's awesome, no, it's awesome," and it's like, okay, why? And they can't really give a reason. So I guess if I put myself in someone's shoes as to why they still like Lizzie McGuire, I mean, I feel like she was probably a great role model for a bunch of little girls. And same with Lelaine. And I think Gordo was actually a really good role model for us, at that.
Or any young Jewish man.
Just a young man. Like
he has a bar mitzvah. It's
No, he's Jewish. I know.
It's canon.
Right. But also I think there's the three characters there. They're wholesome and they're good. And again, I think that's a good. I would say personally that good role models. And so I imagine someone our age who grew up watching Lizzie McGuire, maybe they watch it now and maybe they don't get the same enjoyment, but they probably are like, you know what, I can't wait to show my kids that. So for that, I understand why someone's saying it was still good. For me, and I can speak for Zoe here too, we had a tough time getting through it. We were definitely like, this show is a little too wacky for us. And it's, again, I give them credit for the creativity, because at least it wasn't just completely by the numbers in terms of just like a straightforward, because here's the thing with the cutaways, yeah, that shows creativity and imagination, but it was a little bit overkill. In my opinion.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it. I like it. I like that it's like full Evil Dead 2, where there's like a lot of weird camera movements and like sounds and shit.
What's that sound? The scream sound effect again?
The which one?
The scream sound effect. It's in a Goofy movie as well.
Oh, the Wilhelm scream.
Wilhelm scream. That's it. Yeah, that was there. I heard that in like both episodes.
Yeah, that stuff I don't have a problem with. I like how it's kind of the exact opposite style of Pete and Pete. Which Pete and Pete is way weirder, way more whimsical, but it's really slow.
Yeah.
And
Pete and Pete is like if Richard Linklater directed a kid's show.
Yeah.
But they were still like, be whimsical and weird, Rich. Yeah.
But I don't have a problem with the structure of the show, but the thing that I'm always struck by when we do something like this is that children's TV is just a little hard to watch.
Yes.
It's difficult to watch stuff that's aimed at children.
Right.
And it can just be hard to get anything out of it now. And that's kind of how I felt with Lizzie McGuire. Same thing. I was like, okay, I'd let my kid watch this. I get it. Sure. I get why people liked it.
For sure.
But even I came in with like, I'm going to watch like 30 of these episodes. And got through about 6.5 before I was like, I'm set here.
Right. I want to know what the adults who made it think. I want to know what the executives think. I think they all probably thought it's going to make us money and it's going to be great programming for Disney Channel. But it's like, would you watch it? That's the question I leave them with. And you know what? I don't think there's anything. I think if the answer is no, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that sometimes, I think people forget sometimes this is a business and you have to make products for this business. And it's nice to be able to like imagine working at HBO. It's like, yeah, that programming is spectacular, but sometimes you got to put stuff on that I mean, look, I love HBO, but like there's a new show coming out called, I think it might have already been out. It's called The Nevers or whatever. I have zero. It looks like the complete opposite of my cup of tea.
Dude, every time HBO has The Wire, they also have fucking John from Cincinnati. Like, not everything
Nice
is gold on HBO. Like,
That's a great point.
The good stuff just overshadows
It's a great point.
lackluster stuff.
Yeah.
Or Luck, in case you like being in the glue business.
Yeah, the glue business with Michael Mann and Dustin Hoffman.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't have a problem with the show. I don't think it's still good. I would challenge anyone who liked it and claims that they still like it to watch it again.
I would too.
Because it's an interesting time capsule, but I think after about an episode or two, you're going to be like, I'm set.
Yes.
There's just not enough there when you're older. Not a bad show, but definitely by the rules as I've tried to keep them, nothing there for me currently, not in the rotation, not still good.
It's not in the rotation. I agree with you. Definitely not still good. And you said it, you said it perfectly. I agree with every word you said. So if anybody listening feels differently and wants to come on to talk to us about it, preferably a woman, that'd be great to hear. No, I mean, I'd love to hear a female perspective on why they think the show is still good, because I think that is something that is lacking in this episode. Doesn't mean that I think this was a great episode. I had a lot of fun. But I think that'd be an interesting perspective to bring on. Thanks everybody for listening. Please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, iTunes. You can even write a little something if you'd like. You can write that I suck and that Bear's awesome and that you love his beard, or you can write that you miss his beard, as long as you give us 5 stars. And please remember to subscribe. Find us on YouTube. Is It Still Good? Find us on Instagram @StillGoodShow. And finally, stillgoodshow.com, where you can send us a message, stillgoodshow@gmail.com. Next week, what are we doing, Bear?
I have no idea.
Stumped you, didn't I? Yeah. We are doing, I know. I didn't know if you did. Next week, we are doing Memento, the 20-year anniversary of Christopher Nolan's big breakout feature. We will discuss Memento. Have you seen Tenet yet?
No, I missed it, and I'm waiting for it to come back. I'm sure. I don't know this for sure, but it'll come back into theaters.
Yeah, it probably will. I'd be curious. I fucking hated that movie, so maybe we'll discuss that too if you see it in time. I just brought it up because I was like, that'd be an interesting little like bookend to discuss those two. Anyways, guys, thanks a lot for listening. We'll catch you on the next one, and enjoy Lizzie McGuire if you have Disney Plus. We'll see you next time. For Bear Kennedy, I'm Andrew Carter.